The first time Kai noticed a noise in his mind, he was 12 years old, standing on the wet shore after the ocean had stolen his father. The waves crashed, the sky cried, and his mother held his trembling hand. He didn't fully understand what death meant, but he understood absence. He understood silence that weighed more than words. And in that silence, something began, something sharp, restless, an invisible a voice inside him that never stopped asking what if? What if he hadn't begged his father to take him fishing that morning? What if he hadn't asked for one last story before sleeping that night? What if, for years, the ocean stayed quiet? But the noise in his mind never did. Kai grew up in a small village by the sea where every day smelled like salt and memories. His mother mended nets on the porch. Old men drank tea and spoke about tides. Children ran barefoot across the rocks. But Kai lived mostly inside his head. While others played, he worried. While others spoke, he hesitated. While others dreamed, he calculated the risks. He became a man who measured every breath, every step, afraid to make a wrong move. Afraid to lose someone again. By his early 20s, Kai had learned to live like a stone, hard, quiet, unmoving. He had dreams once, to travel, to sail, to paint. Yet each dream drowned under thoughts like heavy anchors. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if it's already too late? People in the village whispered. Kai is smart, but he is frozen. Everything changed the night his mother fell ill. Her voice had become soft like a fading tide. She lay on the old wooden bed, her hair now silver like moonlight on water. Kai sat beside her, eyes tired from thinking, worrying, calculating. She looked at him with a tenderness that could break a mountain. Kai, she whispered, do you remember the sea? He frowned. Of course. No, she said gently. You remember its fear. But do you remember its flow? Kai didn't answer. He couldn't. She lifted her weak hand and placed it over his. When you were young, you used to run into the water without thinking. You trusted the waves. You didn't need to know what they would do. You flowed. Her voice cracked like fragile shells beneath feet. Kai, life is not a puzzle you need to solve. It is a sea you must learn to enter. He said nothing. He didn't know how to point. 1 week later, she was gone. And once again Kai stood by the same ocean, his heart empty and full at the same time. The waves roared, but he felt no sound. He just stared. All his thoughts, all his fears, all his carefulness, none of it had stopped life from taking her. He dropped to his knees, sand sticking to his palms, eyes burning. What is the point of thinking? He whispered. If I still lose everything? His voice was swallowed by the wind. He felt like a hollow shell the sea didn't care to keep. That night, Kai couldn't sleep. He sat in the old house, now echoing with everything missing. He wandered aimlessly and found himself in the attic, where memories slept beneath dust. He opened an old wooden chest. Inside, a faded painting brush, a child's seashell necklace, and a folded letter, addressed to him. Handwriting he knew by heart. He unfolded it with hands that weren't steady. Kai, if you're reading this, it means life has done what life always does. It has arrived, and it has taken its own now. You must choose who you will become next. He swallowed, breath uneven. You feel too much. But instead of letting your feelings flow, you cage them in your mind. I want to tell you something I learned too late. There is a world beyond thinking. A place of stillness and movement at once. In Japanese, they call it Ku no Sekai, the world of emptiness, the world where thought stops and life begins. Her words tightened around his chest. If you ever feel lost, go to the old lighthouse on the northern cliff. There is someone there who can show you what I could not. Go, Kai, before you waste your life watching yourself drown. His hands trembled as he finished the letter. Go to the lighthouse. A simple instruction, but it felt like stepping off a cliff. And yet, something inside him stirred, like a small flame in a storm. Hope, or maybe desperation that looked like hope. The next morning, the sky was gray, and the village slept. Kai wrapped himself in his father's old coat and left, past the rocks, past the abandoned docks, toward the cliffs where seagulls screamed like warnings. The lighthouse was old, lonely, and half-broken, a tower of bones against the roaring wind. As he climbed, doubts strangled him. What am I doing? This is stupid. No one is here. Go home. You're wasting time. Halfway up, he almost turned back, until he remembered the final line of the letter. Before you waste your life watching yourself drown. He gritted his teeth and continued. At the top, the world felt endless. Below him, the sea that had taken everything. Around him, silence thick enough to hear his heartbeat. And then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. An elderly man stood there, wrapped in a long white coat, beard flowing like winter clouds. His eyes were calm, ocean deep, eyes that had seen storms and survived. You came, the man said, as though he had been waiting decades. Kai's throat tightened. How did you? The man raised a hand. You see Kuno Sekai. Kai froze. The words from the letter echoed in his mind. The man walked past him, toward the railing, staring at the sea. You have lived trapped in your mind, thoughts like chains, fear like salt in every wound. He turned his gaze onto Kai. But now, you want to flow again. Kai didn't answer. He didn't know how to speak. His silence said everything. The man nodded slowly. Then understand this. To enter Kuno Sekai, you must first face the storm. Kai's breath caught. What storm? The man pointed, not to the sea, but to Kai's chest. The storm inside you. The wind howled. Kai felt small, exposed, unprepared. He asked, voice soft as ash. How do I face it? The old man stepped closer, his presence quiet, strong. You stop thinking. He paused, letting the words cut deep. You start flowing. The sea crashed against the cliffs, as if agreeing. Kai's pulse hammered. He felt the cliff beneath him, the weight of the world, the possibility of change, and fear gripping him like claws. The storm inside him had awakened, and now there was no turning back. The wind from the cliffs tore at Kai's coat, but he didn't move. His mind was a storm, each thought a jagged lightning strike, each doubt a crashing wave. The old man beside him said nothing, only waited. And Kai realized, with a hollow pang, that the waiting was worse than any storm he had faced before. The first step into Kuno Sekai, the old man had said, was stopping thought. But how could Kai stop the ceaseless chatter of fear, guilt, and grief that had been his constant companion for years? The world felt heavy, and yet empty. The weight of his mother's absence pressed into his chest like a stone, and the memory of his father's last laugh haunted his ears. Kai clenched his fists, digging his nails into his palms. He tried to breathe, but the air felt sharp, cold, like glass slicing through lungs. The cliff below seemed endless, the waves crashing as though each one carried a part of his soul away. And in that vast expanse, he realized something terrifying. He had never really lived. He had only survived. The old man's voice broke through the roar of the wind, soft but unyielding. You are afraid of yourself, he said. You measure life, weigh it, calculate it. But life is not measured. It is lived. Do you understand? Kai shook his head, lips pressed into a thin line. I don't know how. You don't know how because you've been trying to control the sea with a net, the man replied. Kuno Sekai is not control. It is surrender. You must flow with it, not against it. Kai's stomach churned. Flow how? Everything I do ends in pain. I lose people, I fail, The old man lifted a hand, cutting him off. Then you fail. You fall. You hurt. That is not the end. That is the beginning. Kai looked at him, eyes wide. But what if I drown inside myself? The old man smiled faintly, eyes glinting like the sea under storm clouds. Then you will learn to swim. That is what Kuno Sekai teaches. That is what life teaches if you let it. Kai wanted to argue, to run, to climb down the cliff and escape the wind and the sea and the memory of everyone he had lost. But the old man did not move, did not flinch. Something in that unshakable calm pierced through the panic rising in Kai's chest. He clenched his jaw and nodded, though his hands trembled. Teach me. The old man's gaze softened. Not with words. With experience. You cannot think your way into this world. You must live it. Kai's first lesson came in silence. The man guided him to the edge of the cliff, where the wind tore at their bodies. Close your eyes, he said. Listen. Feel. Let go of thinking. Kai obeyed, trembling. His heart pounded, and for the first time, there was no plan, no calculation, no safety net. Only the wind and the salt air and the roar of the waves below. Every instinct screamed to flee, but he stayed, forcing himself to breathe. Minutes, or was it hours, passed. Time blurred. He felt the storm inside him rise unbidden. Memories of his mother, his father, his failures, his loneliness, all collided like rocks in a river. And then, unexpectedly, he felt something shift. A small, quiet part of him that had been buried beneath fear began to float. The old man's voice was a soft echo. Flow, Kai. Flow, and you will find yourself. The next days were harder. The lessons were not gentle. The old man pushed him into the sea during high tide, made him stand on the edge of cliffs with nothing but the wind, made him endure silence so deep it shook him to the bone. Kai screamed, argued, wanted to give up. But with every moment, something inside him changed. He began to notice the small things. The rhythm of the waves. The way the wind bent the grass. The sound of his own heartbeat, steady beneath the chaos. The pain of missing his mother became less like a chain and more like a compass pointing towards something he couldn't yet name. One evening, after a long day of training, Kai sat on the cliff, drenched in rain, shivering. He watched the horizon, gray and infinite. He felt a strange calm, not because the storm had ended, but because he no longer fought it. He let it be. Let it flow. Let it teach him. You are learning, the old man said from behind him. But the world will not stop testing you. Your mind will still pull you back into its traps. The question is, will you follow it, or will you move forward? Kai thought of every what if that had haunted him for years. Every dream he had abandoned. Every time he had held back out of fear. And for the first time, he let the thought go. It slipped through his fingers like water, and he felt light. The next morning brought a new challenge. A storm had risen overnight, waves crashing higher than Kai had ever seen. The old man gestured toward a small rowboat. Out there, he said. You will test yourself. Kai hesitated. The roar of the sea was terrifying. His mind screamed, warned him, begged him to turn back. But something deeper told him to move forward. Something that had nothing to do with thinking. Something that had everything to do with living. He stepped into the boat. The wind hit him like a wall, the waves slapped against the hull, and every instinct told him he would fail. But he rowed. He breathed. He let the current guide him, not his fear. Minutes became hours. Kai felt exhaustion, pain, doubt. He wanted to cry out, but he stayed silent, listening to the rhythm of the waves. And slowly, painfully, he began to understand. Flow was not the absence of struggle. It was the acceptance of it. It was moving forward, even when fear was a storm in your chest. By the time he returned to shore, drenched and trembling, he looked at the old man with new eyes. I think I understand, he whispered. The old man nodded, a faint smile playing across his lips. You understand the first truth. You cannot stop the storm, Kai. You can only move with it. And in that movement, you will find freedom. Kai sank to the sand, exhausted, soaked, alive. For the first time in his life, he did not overthink. He did not calculate. He did not worry about what might happen. He flowed, and yet, deep in the corner of his mind, a new fear began to stir. Not the fear of losing, failing, or dying. This was something subtler, something heavier. The fear that, even now, he might not be enough. The old man's eyes caught his. Tomorrow, he said, you will face the storm within. The one you carry, the one you cannot see. Kai swallowed, heart racing. He realized that the hardest challenge was still ahead, not the sea, not the wind, not the cliffs, but the storm he carried inside him, built from years of grief, guilt, and fear. He looked at the horizon, gray and endless, and felt the first true taste of something he had not known in years. Hope. But hope, he now understood, was fragile. And the next step would not be easy. The morning arrived like a whisper. Gray clouds lingered above the cliffs, but the sea below was calmer than it had been in days. Kai stood at the edge, soaked from the night's rain, muscles still trembling from the storm he had faced in the boat. The old man stood beside him, silent, waiting as he always did. Kai took a deep breath. Today was different. The wind felt less like an enemy and more like a guide, brushing against his skin, carrying salt and freedom. The old man's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "The storm within," the man said, "is always louder than the one outside. But today you will face it." Kai's heart pounded. This was not about waves or cliffs. This was the moment he had been avoiding all his life, the moment where fear, grief, guilt, and regret collided inside him like a black tide. He felt them rising, clawing at his chest. All the what-ifs of his life, all the losses, every failure, every frozen step he had taken, they were here, raw and impossible to ignore. He wanted to run, to flee into the safety of thought, calculation, or solitude. But a voice inside him, a quiet, persistent whisper, reminded him of the lessons he had learned. The voice of the sea, the wind, the old man. "Flow, Kai. Flow, and you will survive." Kai closed his eyes and let himself feel everything. Not resisting, not judging, not thinking. Just feeling pain, fear, loss, anger, regret. They came crashing like the waves he had faced, relentless and violent. And yet, as he let them move through him without fighting, a strange clarity began to emerge. He realized the storm had always been part of him, but it was not the whole of him. He could ride it, navigate it, let it pass. He could be carried by it instead of drowning in it. The old man watched quietly, letting Kai struggle with himself. Time seemed suspended. The wind howled. The sea roared. And Kai, trembling, bent low and sank to the sand. Tears rolled down his face, not for weakness, but for release. For the first time, he let himself grieve without interruption. He let himself remember his mother, his father, the years he had wasted trapped in thought. He let himself forgive himself for being human, for being afraid, for overthinking every step. When he lifted his head, something had shifted. The fear was still there, yes, but it no longer controlled him. It was a wave he could ride, not a weight he had to carry. The old man stepped closer, placing a hand on Kai's shoulder. "You have begun to understand. Kuno Sekai is not a place you enter with your mind. It is a state you embody with your heart. You cannot force it. You can only flow." Kai nodded, his chest heaving. The words felt simple, almost too simple. But he understood now, the simplicity was the point. Life was not a puzzle to solve. It was a river to navigate. He stood, feeling the wind whip around him, the salt on his skin, the vast horizon stretching endlessly before him. And he realized, he was alive in a way he had never been before. Not just existing, not just surviving, but truly alive. For days, Kai practiced this new way of being. He walked the cliffs, feeling the rhythm of the wind. He rode in the sea, letting the currents guide him. He did not overthink, did not hesitate. He flowed. And with each passing day, the knots in his mind loosened, the storms inside him calmed, and the weight of grief became something he could carry without breaking point. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, Kai sat with the old man on the cliffs. Silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke more than words ever could. "You have changed," the man said quietly. Kai looked at him, a small, genuine smile forming on his lips. "No," he replied. "I've only stopped fighting what's always been inside me." The old man nodded. "Flow, and you will find strength. Flow, and you will find peace. Flow, and you will find yourself." Kai gazed at the horizon, feeling the endless rhythm of the sea and sky, realizing that life itself was not something to be figured out, controlled, or feared. It was something to move with, something to experience fully, and something to surrender to when the current was too strong. He thought of his mother's words, the letter, the cliffs, the storms. He thought of all the years spent trapped in thought, and he smiled softly. The journey had been brutal, terrifying, and exhausting. But it had led him here, to a place of presence, of clarity, of flow. And in that moment, he understood the final lesson of Kuno's Sekai. Life does not wait for you to be ready. It does not pause for your fears, your doubts, or your overthinking. Life flows, and you must flow with it, or risk being left behind, drowning in what never was. Kai took a deep breath, the air full of salt and freedom. He let his arms fall open, feeling the wind and rain and the endless horizon embrace him. He did not plan, he did not calculate, he did not question. He simply moved. He simply existed. He flowed, and in flowing, he found something he had never known before, the quiet, unshakable peace of being alive. The sea stretched endlessly before him, the waves singing the song of life itself. Kai let himself sink into it, not as a victim of his thoughts, not as a prisoner of his fears, but as a man who had learned to ride the currents, who had learned to embrace the storm, who had learned the beauty of surrender, and in that surrender, he was free. Life lesson: sometimes the hardest battles are not against the world, but against the mind. Stop overthinking. Stop fighting the current. Flow. Trust the process. Life is alive, and so are you, if only you let yourself be carried. Kai had lost much, but he had gained everything. And finally, he was home, in himself, in the storm, in the endless flow of life. The cliff, the sea, the wind, they had taught him more than any book, any teacher, or any careful plan ever could. He smiled again, softly, letting the world move around him, and for the first time, truly, he was at peace.